Nearly every journalist makes a mistake now and again, and when a misstep is really bad, your credibility and your employers can take a hit. Getting it wrong is especially dangerous these days as President Trump's war on the press's credibility rages on. And now, ABC's news chief investigative correspondent has given the president new ammunition. Adam has more.
The ongoing Russia investigation has reached President Trump's innermost circle.
It was a bombshell development. Michael Flynn, the president's former national security advisor, was pleading guilty to lying to the FBI and cooperating with special counsel Robert Mueller. But ABC News' Brian Ross added a twist that no one else had.
He is prepared to testify that President Trump, as a candidate, Donald Trump, directed him to make contact with the Russians, which contradicts all that Donald Trump has said at this point.
An apparent sign of collusion that had Trump's detractors cheering.
Prepared to testify that as a candidate, Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yes!
But it turns out Ross had the timing all wrong. He blamed his source.
He said the president had asked Flynn to contact Russia during the campaign. He's now clarifying that after the election, the president-elect told him to contact Russia.
ABC News apologized for what it called a serious error. And in audio obtained by CNN, President James Goldston told colleagues, "We have taken a huge hit." That seems indisputable.
He gives, a sword to the president to then raise and say fake news.
As for Ross, he got a 4-week unpaid suspension. Given his track record, he might have gotten off easy.
This has been the same Brian Ross that tried to attach the Aurora, Colorado shooter to the Tea Party. Totally unfounded.
He reported that the anthrax at the White House was the work of Saddam Hussein.
Errors that once led Gawker to dub Ross America's wrongest reporter, an epithet that still holds up.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what ABC is thinking here because, for my money, Brian Ross cannot go back to the investigative unit. They've already said that they're not going to put him back on the Trump White House. Well, then what are you doing there? And also, when we're talking about these very serious allegations of sexual misconduct and people just getting fired left and right and just booted off, it's like this goes to the heart of what you do. This is your living, getting the facts straight. And it seems to me, in many ways, it's more egregious.
I would love to know what protocols were or weren't put in place at ABC to manage him and take advantage of whatever strengths he might bring to the table and avoid embarrassing mistakes like these because there have been so many
every couple
over
of
the
years.
Yeah, and they're not small ones. They are doozies. So I don't know what they have tried to do and maybe failed to make work. We should mention that today CNN ran into a Brian Ross type situation and had to pull back their reporting. They had reported that Donald Trump Jr., please tell me if I got anything wrong here, had been given early access to some WikiLeaks documents involving Hillary Clinton. It turns out that he, in fact, was not given early access. So they had to pull that back. They just stepped in it. And again, we are at a moment where you simply cannot afford to make a huge error like that.
And one thing that's tough is that it would have been a really good breaking story even if he had gotten it correct. If he had said that, what seems to be correct, that Flynn is willing to testify about this contact, after the election. But he does have this tradition, I suppose, of going one step too far. I don't see what the value to ABC is for him because every time he appears on television, he is just an anchor. And I don't mean the broadcast anchor. I mean he's an anchor on their credibility.
Yeah. Well, I think they kept him. I don't know why in this instance because he has won a ton of awards. He's done some...
broken a lot of big stories.
He's broken a lot of big stories, not the least of which is testing the TSA about, checking to, finding all kinds of firearms and stuff. He did it once. They said they cleaned it up. Remember, he went back. They was not cleaned up. That was a huge story. So, what happens in these instances, and we've talked about this when we think about other people. I'm thinking of Fareed Zakaria right now and the charges of plagiarism. When somebody has a reputation that is pretty solid up to that point, it's really hard to get your mind around, well, wait a minute, are you sure this person's wrong? You give them some grace that other people would not get. That's just the facts. That's just what happens. So people who rise to a certain level are given a little bit more berth, and they probably shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Well, there was the error itself, but there was the process. He was shoveling onto the air something from one anonymous source, and we saw him basically blaming his source. You don't go with something like that on the basis of one anonymous source. It was a huge story. It caused the stock market to tank. My suspicion is that ABC is negotiating a retirement package with him right now. Oliver Darcy and Brian Stelter, two of the media reporters for CNN, did an excellent report the other day in which it really seems very unlikely that Brian Ross will return to the air.
The chairman, I think, of the broadcast on Goldstone, whatever his first name, I mean, he was really mad at the process.
Happy.
Because they allowed Brian Ross to go back on the air and clarify instead of just retracting the story completely, just saying we got it wrong. But he did all that mumbo-jumbo with the source. It didn't matter at that point.
It took them hours to acknowledge anything, and then they called it a clarification. Still more hours passed. They finally called it a correction.
Yeah, I don't understand
In both the CNN and ABC cases, the leaks for a lot of these stories are coming from the congressional investigations, and those are inherently coming with some sort of political motivation. I mean, the dating issue on the CNN emails as well. You just have to be cautious. And unlike baseball, if he hits 700 as a big name investigative reporter, that's not good enough.
And to Goldstone's point, the president, you know, if you got it later, it was still a big scoop.
20 minutes later, it still would have been good.
You know?
That's right.